The foreign policy for World War I was isolationism. This isolationist attitude was developed due to the Great Depression of the 1930s, destroying the country's economy. Americans felt by avoiding any foreign entanglements we could rebuild our economy. We avoided fighting in the war as much as possible until Germany gave us no choice but to enter the war. Unrestricted submarine warfare. This caused the United States to leave a state of isolationism and enter the fighting in Europe late in the war. Enemy countries thought we waited until every country was at the... And here's a cartoon that represents the government's policy of isolationism. Up next is Derby with World War II.
Throughout American history, we've seen the United States change their foreign policy due to various different circumstances around the world. At the end of World War I, we adopted an isolationist foreign policy. This policy means that we plan on keeping to ourselves and only interacting with foreign countries through trade. At the beginning of World War II, the United States still had this policy specifically to stay out of foreign wars and stay away from allegiances. The United States was successful in staying out of these foreign affairs and only trading with different parties of the war. Until December 7th, 1941, with the attack against the United States on Pearl Harbor. Due to this attack, the United States was forced into this World War II. When the war was over, the United States decided that communism was an enduring issue and it needed to stop spreading to other parts of the world. The United States decided that we would be the ones to stop communism from spreading and protect smaller, weaker nations from being forced to adopt this form of government. This is when we switched our policy to containment. The reason that we switched the policy after World War II was because we were now a part of the League of Nations, and because we thought with this policy we could stop wars before they started. We wanted to make sure communism wouldn't spread to other nations, and we could end future conflicts swiftly.
With the ending of World War II in 1945, the next major conflict the United States would be involved in is the Korean War. Coming out of the war, the United States would tend to have issues with the Soviet Union. They were attempting to spread communism across Europe and Asia. This would start many conflicts. With the geography of Korea being a major factor in the war, the North was attempting to spread communism to the South, which started a civil war. The north part of the country was aided by Communist China and the Soviet Union, which caused the League of Nations to form. Great Britain and the United States to assist the South. The foreign policy of containment was used during these Cold War conflicts to attempt to not let communism spread as much. Containment was successful in some ways because the whole country of Korea and Vietnam are not communist. A piece of political propaganda produced by the United States can be seen here. The United States technically never declared war on Korea. Instead, military action was authorized by the United Nations. This was called a proxy war, which means that one country is fighting on behalf of another country to assist them. This was the first of these types of wars of the Cold War, which also included the Vietnam War. Now off to Volpe with the Vietnam War.
The beginning of the war in 1955, marking the first arrival of American troops on the ground in the foreign lands of southern Vietnam. The battles never got easier, but only harder, as the bloodshed spread towards the demarcation line, and eventually even past it. The jungle-like terrain made it increasingly difficult for the U.S. troops to be victorious against the Viet Cong due to their knowledge of their homeland in comparison with the United States soldier who knew barely anything about the environment or geography of most battlegrounds within the war. Over time, this resulted in mass casualties on behalf of the United States in South Vietnam, which caused uproar in the American public and led to the resignation of Lyndon B. Johnson. In the years following, Richard Nixon took office and approaching the 1970s began to withdraw large amounts of U.S. troops from Vietnam, but intensified U.S. air raids as our country began the largest bombing campaign in its history. Inevitably, the desire to contain the spread of communism through militarism lost support from the American public, which resulted in the end of U.S. involvement in Vietnam in 1975.